Welcome to every single location around the world. It is so good to be joining you. So good to be joining you. If this is your very first time as part of a Freedom Church location, then I hope you're having an incredible experience. And you join us in the middle of a series called Fighting Fit. And this series is all about the reality that the Bible repeatedly calls us up to a lifestyle, calls us up to a rhythm of life that should result in us being fighting fit. Not just healthy, not just strong, but fighting fit. I've got lots of friends in the military, and my friends in the military have a different kind of fitness because they're preparing for something different. And so this series is all there to whip us into shape. We're talking about self-control and discipline and all those kind of words that usually make us shudder a little bit, but actually they're setting us free. One of the things that I love about this idea of being fighting fit is it's going to help us go through the challenges that happen in life. Listen, life is challenging, isn't it? Yeah, even for those of us who believe, as we know God, we're blessed, but life is challenging from time to time. But when you go through life with a latent health and strength, it makes those challenges so much easier to handle. If you've got strength in your relationships, your marriage, your friendships, your family, when things happen, not if, you've got a support network around you. If you live with a physical discipline and a physical health, when things happen, you've got such an advantage. But it's not just about handling the bad things. It's also about taking hold of the opportunities that come your way. I think one of the saddest things is when I see people who, because of the rhythm of their life, cannot take hold of the God opportunities that come their way. So this is an exciting series. And today we're going to talk about something very practical and yet profoundly supernatural. But I would liken this topic to a splinter. Now, those of you who are parents, you know that when your kid has a splinter, they don't want you to go anywhere near it. So this Monday, Saz was away. Eden comes home. She's my eldest. She's got a splinter, and it's a big splinter. The teacher left it. Your parents can sort that out. So anyway, she's there. I fought with her for over an hour, and I could not get this splinter out. Because when your kids, they have a splinter, and you even go vaguely near it, they get this kind of crazy sort of supernatural strength. They become like a sort of a bar of soap, and I couldn't get it out. It wasn't until the next night I pinned her down, lovingly. And then Saz removed the splinter. She's like, "Mummy, I love you. You're amazing." I was like, "I tried for an hour last night, kid." But you know, when you got a splinter, you don't want anybody to go near it. And as soon as you start talking about this in church, people are like, "No, don't touch, no. Because we'd rather keep something that's actually going to get infected than deal with a little bit of pressure, deal with a little bit of thing. Because when you take a splinter out, you suddenly realize, man, it was nothing. And yet it can affect everything. Because today, guys, we're going to talk about money. Oh! And when we talk about money, you see certain people straight down. Other people sink into their chair. Other people suddenly need the toilet. Because it's like a splinter. It's like, don't touch that. Don't touch, no. Anything, tell me about the blessing. Tell me about the good. No, let's not go there. Let's not go there. But you know what? We're going to apply some pressure. And we're going to pop that splinter out today because there's nothing like money that has quite the connection with the human heart. Right? There is nothing like money that has the connection with the human heart. The Bible in 1 Timothy 6 verse 10 says, it says that the love of money, that's important, right? It's not that money itself is evil, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, just for a second, if you're here today and you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, or whatever, just take this statement outside of a faith-based context, and let's just look at it in the plain sight of our society, because you cannot deny that it's true. You know, the love of money is why we have poverty. There is more than enough money to go around in our world, and yet the rich hoard and keep for what? A rainy day? No, for the love of money. And so there are multitudes, thousands, millions of people living in poverty. Why? Because money's evil? No. Because of the love of money, what human beings do. I believe that that's why we've got starvation. There's plenty of resource to go around in our world, and yet we hoard for the love of money. We keep and we throw more food away in our Western societies that would feed and keep people alive because we hoard and we have and we keep. Just think about the business world, decisions where people will literally trample over friends and family to get the next promotion. Why? Because of the next pay packet. Love of money does something to the human heart that's profound. One of the things that I'm a bit kind of sick and tired of hearing is, well, religion, it causes all these world wars. No, it doesn't. I'm really sorry. If you think that that's it, you are naive and ill-informed. I did a history degree, okay? Let's go to town on it. There's a few, maybe 2 or 3 conflicts, world conflicts that you could say are genuinely solely about faith. 99.999% of them are about money. They're about status. They're about control. And religion is just a guise for it, when it's actually mankind's desire to have more. And do you know what, right? If we could just handle money the way that God wants us to handle money, the way the Bible teaches us to handle money, we would see poverty change, starvation change, conflict change. It would transform our generation like nothing else. And yet, people hate hearing what the Bible has to say about money. Oh, that young man, how dare he? Doesn't know my circumstances. But actually, God wants to breathe some into your circumstance, some truth and some faith today. Because here's the deal, guys. The one place that the world should be able to look for an example of how to handle money should be the church. The sad thing is, for the most part, it can't. Because actually, money is as much an issue inside the church as it is outside of the church. That verse actually goes on. It says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith. You see, money has this capacity to take you even away from your faith. But get that last statement, read it. It says, and pierce themselves with many griefs. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've lost all their money. In fact, they could have kept it all, but realized that they'd exchanged it for the real thing. You see, money has, and financial unfitness has the capacity to derail everything. You see, I want us to become financially fit. This isn't about not having any money. This isn't about not being entrepreneurial. It isn't about having vision, not having vision to increase your income. It's about what does it really mean to be financially fighting fit? Because the opposite has the capacity to derail everything. Do you know 1 in 3 divorces cite money as the primary reason why they're splitting up? So it's money that causes parents to have to raise children in split homes, that echoes through generations. Because it is the love of money that can cause so much conflict, derail ministries, split churches, cause conflict in nations. Can we just wake up? Because we got a chance to be different. You see, the Bible speaks about 2 different elements when it comes to money. It talks about what we do with our hands, i.e. how we steward our money. But the bit that people don't like is where the Bible then starts to touch onto the heart, how we feel about our money, what it says about us. And in order to become financially fighting fit, you've got to follow God's way in both. And that's what we're going to explore today. But I want to introduce you to 3 different people today. The first is a man who struggled because often our hearts struggle with what God asks us to do with our hands. You see, often our hearts struggle to do what God asks us to do with our hands. And the first person I'm going to introduce you is Judas Iscariot. Now, if you're not familiar with biblical teaching, Jesus lived just over 2,000 years ago, and at the age of 30, he started a ministry. He started to preach and teach and heal people and do incredible, amazing things. But as part of that, what he did was he gathered around him initially 12 men, a whole host of different individuals, and Judas was one of them. And Judas is famous because he's the disciple that actually goes on to betray Jesus. But we don't know a huge amount and don't tend to focus a huge amount on him. But he had a unique relationship with money because Judas actually looked after the disciples' money bag. You see, the disciples had money. Yeah, there would have been offerings, things coming in, going out, and he was in charge of the money. And what we know is that he was corrupted by it. Because in John 12, there's a moment where a lady called Mary Magdalene, she's lived a life, right? And Jesus changes her world. And in a moment of extravagant just love and adoration and worship, she takes this bottle of perfume. It was pure nard. It would have been bottled at the base of the Himalayas. It was worth over a year's wages. They think it was her dowry, her wedding gift, or her inheritance. It was sealed. This isn't the kind of bottle that you screw the cap back on. So she smashes it on his feet and just starts washing his feet with her hair. We struggle to understand that in our current cultures. But it's basically her saying, Jesus, you've changed my life. Jesus, I want to love you. Jesus, I want to dedicate everything I am to you. I want to humble myself. I want to give the best of what I've got to follow you, Jesus. But Judas pipes up. He's got a problem with it. He turns around and said, how can you let her do this? We could have sold that and given the money to the poor. And maybe some of us are thinking, yeah, I mean, come on, what a waste. It's perfume on his feet. The religious often struggle with extravagant worship. Because in reality, Judas wasn't actually caring about the poor, because the Bible in John 12, 4-6 says that he was creaming off the top of the bag. So he looked at that pure nard and thought, I could sell that for 30 grand. I could keep 3 and they wouldn't notice. You see, Judas had been corrupted by money. It then says at the Last Supper, Jesus gives bread to Judas, and it's a symbol. He's the one that betrays him. And the Bible says at that point, Satan enters him. And so we often look and we think the enemy. No, Judas was corrupted before the enemy got involved. Because the human heart, when it comes to money, is so corruptible. But it goes on like this. He actually approaches the religious leaders. For years, I thought that the religious leaders had approached him. I thought they'd corrupted him. But in actual fact, he proactively sold Jesus out. He went and he said, how much are you going to give me if I hand him over? Because they tried to capture Jesus. They tried to kill Jesus. They couldn't do it. And for years, again, I thought that it must have been a huge amount of money, 30 shekels of silver. It must have been, tens of thousands. After all, he's selling out the Son of God. He's selling out a man he knows he's innocent. He's selling out somebody that probably at some point he loved and was willing to follow. He's selling out someone that he's seen do good things. Surely it was a huge amount of money, but in actual fact, it was quite the opposite. 30 shekels of silver was the price of a slave. Just imagine it being counted out. Just imagine the coins dropping into his hand. Because it wasn't just the price of a slave. It was actually the token compensation for the accidental death of a slave. It wasn't even what a slave was worth. It was a throwaway amount of money. That's how little they valued him. You see, money doesn't need to be huge to corrupt the human heart. And we know what Judas went on to do is he betrays Jesus with a kiss. Jesus is captured, and a few days later, he dies. You see, what we've got to realize is that Jesus died on account of a man's issue with money. You ever realize that in the story? Because we know that Jesus was in charge and that he chose the time, but it was about money. It was about the corruption of money. And here's the thing. We have a chance to be different. But in order to become financially fighting fit, we're going to need 2 things. And the first thing is financial discipline. Now, who likes the word discipline? Oh, yeah. That's like I know I should say yes. Discipline's a dirty word, isn't it? We don't like it because it's ultimately about the stuff we don't want to do. But the problem is that we don't like discipline because we've made discipline just about discipline. When actually discipline is the tool and the path to something else. And I guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt, any area in your life you employ discipline, over time, you'll experience freedom and blessing. Everywhere. Everywhere. In every aspect of your life. In every aspect of your life. Paul in Colossians 3 writes to the church and says, do you know, I love to see how disciplined you are. That's one of the first things he says to them. You know, if you employ discipline with your physical fitness and your health, you say no to the food you shouldn't eat, you say yes to the workout you don't want to do. Over time, you will experience the freedom of having more energy. You will experience the blessing of not putting your back out every time you pick something up. Wherever you employ discipline, you will in time experience freedom and blessing. And there is no greater place that shows itself than with money. But let's get real practical. What's that mean? It means you've got to budget. Oh, I don't want to budget. Just want to spend it as it comes in and out. Josh always takes the mick out of me. He says, you always do a stupid voice when you preach. Because, that's how I feel about it sometimes. Sometimes when I look at my own heart and I don't want to budget. Ultimately, budgeting is you've got to know what you've got coming in, know what you've got going out, and live appropriately somewhere in between. And if you haven't got enough coming in to cover what's going out, you've got to do something about what's going out and do something about what's coming in. You see, budgeting isn't suddenly going to give you thousands of pounds you never knew you had. I did a budget and I've got 10 grand in the account. No, budgeting is going to empower you to make the change you're too lazy to make right now. You've got to become financially disciplined. Ultimately, you've got to say no. Isn't that something we hate? Why do we have crazy credit schemes? And in the small print, this is 1,050% for every pound or dollar or shilling. It's because we hate the word no. We hate being told to wait. Why on earth can companies just keep cracking up their prices? It's because they know that mankind won't wait. They know that we won't live within our means. I just got to have it now, and I want it now, because if I don't have it now, then I'm not going to be like my friends, and I want it now because I just want it now. People get in debt, not because they're not financially free, but because they're not financially disciplined. You can pray all the prayers you like, claim all the scriptures you want, listen to all the preachers, attend church 10,000 times a day. But if you're not willing to get financially disciplined, you can jog on. God is gracious, but he's not going to bless your laziness. I've met so many people that have an issue with giving and tithing, and then, they say, oh, can you help me? And we start going through their finances, and I suddenly think, oh my goodness, you've got like 4 times the income we do. How on earth are you not able to give and tithe? And I suddenly realized it's not about their outgoings, it's about their lack of discipline. I've never had to budget, but then I've never got anything back at the end of the month, so I could never give anything to God. You're lazy, you're robbing yourself, you're robbing God, and you're robbing someone else. Just because you can't be bothered. It's not easy. It's not enjoyable. I don't necessarily enjoy doing my finances. You're there for hours. Oh my goodness, all right, that's coming in, that's coming out. But it gives life. There's something else with financial discipline. You've got to use credit strategically, not selfishly. See, I don't believe that the Bible teaches that debt is a right thing, but I do believe that we can leverage, we can loan to start businesses, to make more money. But most of us are in debt, not because it was a strategic attempt, but it was a selfish desire. Look at the minus mark on your account and you will see your sin. For the most part. I'm not here to condemn you, but I am here to bring some conviction. I am here to put my thumbs around the splinter that you would write, I want to leave now. So let's meet our second character. He's called the young rich ruler. And it's interesting because we meet him in 3 out of the 4 Gospels. That's notable. It shows that 3 out of the 4 Gospel writers noticed this was such a profound moment. He's a rich young ruler. And Jesus is leaving his town and he runs out. That's important to note as well. Think about it. He's passionate. He wants to see Jesus. When he runs and he gets there, he kneels. It's humility. Think about it. This guy's a successful businessman, a young rich ruler. He's running after a rabbi of no notoriety, and then he kneels at his feet. Then he calls him good. But that's even more profound as well, because actually what he's saying is, I see that you're God. So let's just add this all up for this guy, right? He's passionate. He's chasing after Jesus. He's humble. He's kneeling himself. He can see that Jesus is not just a good teacher. He's God. And then he says to Jesus, he says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says to him, well, you know the law. You shouldn't murder and don't commit adultery. Don't lie. In other words, the Old Testament law. And this young man says, well, I've done all that since I was young and with passion. And Jesus says, well, there's one thing for you that you lack. You need to sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. He then goes on to talk about how hard it is for wealthy people to enter the kingdom of God. And people have so often mispreached this, like God has a problem with wealth. He doesn't. God has a problem with wastefulness. God has a problem with when what we own owns us. We're, as a leadership team, we're praying. We believe that in the next 5 years, that there is going, or I believe in the next 5 years, we're going to start to have maybe our first millionaires in our church. And do you know why? Because we're praying you in. And I'm not talking about somebody outside of the church right now. I'm talking about some people in our business. I'm prophesying to you right now. But that's only going to come to the people that don't want it for themselves, but want it for the kingdom. And then they can enjoy the blessing. They can enjoy the blessing. They can receive. There isn't a problem with that. But there's something about him, what he owned him. And the Bible says that he went away sad. And so my money is on the fact that he never made that choice. Because think about it. If we heard about him in 3 Gospels, we'd hear about him again, wouldn't we? Oh, and that guy we told you about in Luke 18, he did it. No, he didn't. You see, this man was financially disciplined, but he wasn't financially free. You see, financial freedom isn't about being debt-free. That's just about discipline. Financial freedom is something else. And we're going to meet our 3rd character. His name is Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus is a bad man, okay? Zacchaeus is a bad man. He's a short man. He's a tax collector. So what that means is he's a short man. Did I say something else? Is it funny because I'm short? Thanks, guys. Anyway, Zacchaeus, he's a bad man. He's a tax collector. He's robbing off his own people to pay the enemy, right? He is a bad man, but talk about financial discipline. He's going to have it, right? He's going to know everything coming in, everything going out. He even knows what's coming in and out of your account, right? And he's short. He can't see through the crowd. But I actually think the crowd would have shunned him and not let him be there anyway. So he climbs a tree and Jesus sees him. And he says, Zacchaeus, I want to eat at your house. Like, Zacchaeus is the last person that Jesus should even give any attention to. How does he even know his name? Well, he's God, so he made him. He knows him. But how about this? Perhaps Zacchaeus' reputation went far enough that Jesus heard about him before he was in the town. Jesus goes to his house. He shares the gospel, the forgiveness of God. He says, I'm going to give you a second chance, Zacchaeus. I'm going to give you a chance to turn your life around. And Zacchaeus gets saved. He puts his hand up. He says, Jesus, I want to follow you. Jesus, I want to give my life to you. And do you know what he does as a result? He gives. In fact, he gives an exponential gift into the ministry. But then he says, if I've stolen from anyone, I want to pay back 4 times the amount. Now, here's the thing. Can we guarantee that Zacchaeus had 4 times the amount? No. He might have been, by making that commitment, setting himself up for 10 years of repayment, but that's how much what Jesus had given him meant to him. You see, financial freedom only comes when we start becoming a giver. You see, financial freedom is when what you own doesn't own you, the rich young ruler. You just can't part with it. Financial freedom is when money doesn't rule your heart, Judas, so corrupted for such a small amount of money. But here's the thing, financial freedom only comes through the freedom of giving. And that's the bit that people hate. Oh, it's telling me to get rid of it. Well, I earned this money. God gave you the ability to do the job you do. It's a blessing in the first place. There's a story about how they used to capture monkeys in the jungle. They'd take a coconut, they'd cut just a small enough hole in the coconut, and they'd fill it with like these fragrant nuts and food. And the monkey would put his hand in, right? But then he wouldn't be able to get his hand back out. It would set off the trap, it would make a sound, and the poachers would come, and either that monkey was captured or he was killed. But the reality is you like me are thinking, well, if he got his hand in, how the heck and why the heck doesn't he get his hand out? It's because he wouldn't let go of the nuts. He wouldn't let go. Do you know what? So many of us are holding on to a pitiful thing that we think is worth holding on to, and yet it's actually holding us captive. And we just I can't let go. No. You see, tithing is not a man construct to fund the church. It's a God construct to save our hearts. The reason, beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation, God calls us to be givers. And that begins with faithfulness in tithing back to God through the local church. And then beyond that, the reason he did it is because he could see that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And here's the reality, guys. A lot of us are just a bunch of monkeys with our hands in a coconut holding on to a bunch of nuts. We look at that and we go, stupid monkey. Look in the mirror. I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to challenge you. I'm not here to offend you, but I am here to provoke you. Because I can fluff you around the edges, or I can preach God's truth. And maybe, just maybe, like me and Saz 11 years ago, today you'll get set free. And maybe you'll start to walk in financial discipline. And maybe you'll start to walk in financial freedom. But here's the thing, you can't get financially fighting fit without both. You have to start to let go. Because in that, when you give, it's I trust. I worship. I don't just trust God, but I actually trust my leaders. And here's the thing, that's hard to do sometimes because people fail us. That's why God asks us to do it. Because it humbles us. It protects the human heart. You see, when people say, well, I've got a problem with tithing. No, you don't. You've got a problem with money. You don't have a problem with tithing. You've got a problem with pride. You've got a problem with control. You've got a problem with fear. Stop doing the war thing. Religion makes all these wars. Tithing. No. And start addressing the real issue. Probably you've got an issue with discipline.
Right. Come on, Dave.
So often we're a bit too afraid to tell people the truth because we're afraid of offense. Do you know what I'm afraid of? Repetition. Tomorrow you going out the same as you came in here. You see, so often people say, well, tithing is just an Old Testament thing. You know, we're not under the law. And if, again, you're not familiar with church, the law is the Old Testament. And it was, you know, starts with the Ten Commandments. And it was like these rules that mankind had to adhere to in order to be close to God. Jesus comes along and he kind of blows them out of the water with this thing called grace. In other words, you can't earn my love. I'm giving it you freely, but now you need to live in the light of it. So people say, well, tithing, it's an Old Testament construct. Let's just see what Jesus did with those Old Testament constructs. Matthew chapter 5, you've heard it said, do not murder. That's one of the things in the law. He says, do not murder. Well, I'm not under the law anymore, so just think about that concept for a second. Oh, we're not under the law with tithing. Oh my goodness, what the heck door are you opening up? Jesus says, you've heard it said, do not murder. He doesn't minimize the law, he maximizes it. He says, I tell you, do not even hate. We're back to the hands and the heart thing. See, the law was just about the actions of the heart. Grace is about the posture of actions of the hands. Grace is about the posture of the heart. He says, do you know what? To God, it's as important as if you took life as if you hold an offense. It's as important as if you look down on someone and call them a fool. So you want to start talking about not being under the law anymore? Let's go on. He then says, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. Oh, I'm not under the law, it's okay. No, Jesus says, I tell you, do not even look lustfully at somebody who isn't your spouse. Are you starting to get the picture of what grace really means? Let's hypothesize if he'd included tithing. You've heard it said, give 10% of the gross of everything you have to God. Before we go on, let's pause. I put the word gross in there on purpose. Because here's the thing, if I earn £100,000, I get taxed 40%, that's 40 grand. I get 60 grand in my bank account. I still earn 100 grand. I tithe 10 grand on 100 grand because that's what I earned. They were my taxes. When I go to the bank to get the mortgage, I don't tell them, oh yeah, I earn 60. No, I earn 100. Quite proud of it in those settings. But when we come counting our money out for God, let me take the car off it and take the rent off it and take the other things off it. You're a monkey with your hand in a coconut. You've heard it said, give a gross 10% of everything you have to God. But I tell you, mobilize every penny you have for the purpose of the kingdom. Everything, the car you drive, the house you own, the job you're doing, the promotion you're chasing. It's all about the kingdom. It's all about the kingdom. Every penny you have. You want to start having an issue with 10%? You want to start being under grace? You got to realize grace demands more. Suddenly we're like, oh, 10% sounds quite good. I think I'll be okay with that, Lord. You see, Jesus did not abolish the law. He completed it and increased it. So here's the question today, church. Who are you? Judas? Corrupted by money? Do you know, I couldn't shake, as I prepared this message, that there is a marriage about to break up that's going to be saved by this message. because of the root of your issues is how you're handling money. And you can't see it right now, but right now there's a revelation coming. There's a revelation coming, and money is right at the root of all the conflict, the disagreement, the disunity, and that's why the divorce papers are on the table. Do you want to stay Judas? Do you want to trade in your destiny for 30 shekels of silver? Or are you maybe the rich young ruler? You know, you come to church, you run after Jesus, you kneel, you see him as God. But then when he says, give up that thing that you own that actually owns you. You mean you really? Who are you? Or are you Zacchaeus? Or at least have a desire to become like him? You see, what happens in our church is that when we preach messages on giving, our giving goes up. You know, and maybe it'll go down after this message. So offended. It goes up, but then it peters off. And 4 to 6 months later, we're often back close to where we were before. Often a little bit higher than before, but there's 3 or 4 types of people in this room and in our locations as I preach this message. And as we close this out, I really want you to start to think about who you are in this. There's givers, people who are disciplined, but also free in giving. They hear a message like this and it's, I'm Zacchaeus. I'm Zacchaeus. I just want to give more. I want to go from 10 to 11%. I want to go from 12 to 15. Oh, we already give 20, but I want to give 10 grand to that Cape Town church plan. Not because we can afford it, but because Zacchaeus, oh my goodness, I'm looking again afresh at Jesus. You changed me. You saved me. You set me free. You gave me a second chance. I can't help but give. So givers give more. The second one is we got token givers who start tithing. People who are appeasing their conscience with £100 a month. Oh, well, I give that. You know, that's fine. And then suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, I'm a monkey with my hand and a coconut. And they start tithing. And then you got people that have never given. Oh yeah, I set that standing order up 6 months ago. I thought it was going out. Really? Because now you're lying. And then the fourth type of people is those who get offended. How dare he speak to me with that kind of guile? He doesn't know what I've been through. And they 1 Timothy 6:10 it, they walk. And eventually pierce themselves with many griefs. You see, the problem is that it peels off because we forget the first bit, discipline. And we step out and we go from 11% to 12%, or we give that money that we were hoping for the holiday. And here's what we do subconsciously. I gave a bit more. Where's the blessing? Come on, I increased it. I put another tenner in. Where's the blessing? And do you know what I love about God? Sometimes he makes it harder. And you think, oh, he's cruel. No, he loves you. Because he's trying to really contend for your heart and set your heart free. Becoming financially fit will change your world, but it will also impact the world. Who do you want to be? Judas, the young rich ruler, or Zacchaeus? And you know, you may be here today thinking you're a young person, but I don't actually earn that much. Do you know what? If you get this in your heart now, it will set you free for life. So church, I'm praying that for those of us who are already over the line in our discipline and we're free in giving, I hope that today the Lord himself is inspiring you to get greater and greater vision for your finances. I hope that today you're going to go home and over lunch you're going to say, what are we going to give? What are we going to give? For those of us who've got our hand in a coconut, my prayer is that you're going to go away from this place and say, what does this even say about my faith? What does this say about my God and how I feel towards him? We're going to let go. We're going to sow. We're going to trust. For those of us who've never done it, I hope that there is a faith and fight and a determination rising within you as we close out.